Hello, and welcome to the 2018-2019 Trampoline and Tumbling 2010 Annual Update. One of the purposes of our T210 each year is to ensure that our TNT community is well educated and up to date on the things that are taking place within our program, changes that are helping us keep on that progressive path to ensure that our athletes, coaches, and judges have everything they need in order to be successful. So this year's 2010 course, we're going to help to clarify some of the standing rules and their applications, and then also give you an update on some of the new things that are coming your way. Okay, so today we're going to discuss changes that have been proposed on by our members, by the JO and the Elite Committee, as well as the technical committees. All of those proposals have been voted on and approved by the Trampoline and Tumbling Program Committee, and they'll all take place and go into effect as soon as we have this T210 take place beginning November the 1st. So one of the biggest changes within our sport has been the recent addition of the USOC Safe Sport course. When it began in its inception, it was a course that was required every 2 years. Beginning in 2019, the T210, along with the USOC Safe Sport course, will be an annual requirement for judges and coaches to be on the field to play for the Safe Sport course. Just a reminder, you need to be sure that all of your requirements are completed prior to being on the floor of the sanctioned event. One of our biggest goals within the TNT program is to ensure that everyone has good participation in their events. So what we would like to do, the program committee would like to encourage people to not schedule sanctioned events in the months of April and May. This is a big month for our athletes and coaches because they will be attending the sanctions competitions, the qualifiers for state and regional. Okay, so first things we're going to talk about is some of the rule changes that are common from discipline to discipline and some of the things that will affect you and what you need to do. Starting with our safety matting. It was discussed by the program committee that it is imperative that we make sure that our athletes are safe. So beginning this year in levels 5 through 7, if you're holding a sanctioned competition and you're utilizing an above ground trampoline, one of the things that you need to make sure is that you have a minimum of 2 5 by 10 by 8 inch mats that are beyond the index of each trampoline. These mats need to be fixed together so that there is no possibility for a coach or a spotter or an athlete, if they were to come down in this area, for them to be able to catch a toe or fall or something like that. For our level 8 through senior elite, those sanctioned competitions, again, utilizing an above ground trampoline, they have to have a minimum of 5 feet in width, 13.1 feet beyond the index, and then of course 8 inches thick. There's not a density requirement on these. However, you do need to be sure that you have that length and that also these mats are firmly fixed together and that they are attached to that index frame in order to create a safe environment for those athletes. On double mini, one of the things that has changed is we are now requiring, along with the FIG, that there is a mat that is placed directly beside the double mini on the floor that covers the entire length of the double mini. So that mat is about 6 feet 5 inches, and it needs to be 8 inches thick. So the width from the double mini out to the edge of that safety mat needs to be about 6.5 feet. One of the other things that the program committee discussed was some recent problems that we had with the jury of appeal and that process. We've revised that process just a little bit. So if you're hosting a competition at a local, state, or regional competition, that jury of appeal will need to consist of the following people: a meet referee, and then a chair of the judges panel from a panel that was not involved in the original decision. And then you'll need to select one other judge with the appropriate rating. Of course, all of these judges would need to be free of conflict of interest and not involved in that original call. Once we get to a national event, what we'll be doing is we will be securing the meet referee and 2 additional judges. Those judges must come from either the technical committee or the senior judges council. Again, all judges need to be free from conflicts of interest and not involved in the original call. So we're kind of going to go over kind of the process to help remind you who and how and why this process works and what we need to do in order to ensure that the athlete receives the proper process when they do file an appeal. So first of all, who can file that appeal? A coach for their own athlete, of course, and then an athlete or a competitor for their own score. They are not allowed, or you are not allowed, to file an appeal for an athlete that is not your personal athlete or yourself. How that process works is you have to have a written appeal, of course, with the appropriate appeal fee for whichever type competition that you're at. It needs to be submitted before the start of the next round. Now, the next round is the actual competition of the next group. So if you have very small groups and they only get 2 warm-ups, you don't have much time. So you need to be sure and let someone know that that appeal is coming their way, because once that small flight of athletes has warmed up and they're ready to compete, your time is no longer valid to file an appeal. One of the problems we did have this year at National Championships was when we had an appeal and a final flight of a session, and it taking an extended amount of time to get the information together. So we have put a few parameters on that process as well. What you need to do is if a coach or an athlete is planning on filing an appeal, they need to let the meet referee know within 5 minutes of that last flight of the session that that appeal is coming their way, and then they have 15 minutes in order to get the required documentation, the fee, and if there is a video that they need to get and bring so that the jury of appeal can look at it, that all needs to be taken care of within the next 15 minutes. That way we ensure that no awards are given if there is going to be a possible correction to a flight. Okay, so what kind of is the appeal process? This has changed just a little bit, but we do want to also be sure that we clarify when you are on a jury of appeal, the process and how it should be handled. For a local, state, and regional and national competition, when there is no official video, a coach or competitor will have to provide that video. It needs to be from the same angle as the judges. That does not mean it needs to be from the same side, but just from the appropriate angle where a judge would sit on either side of the apparatus. Or it can be from the perspective that has been designated by the meet referee. We have started designating a spot on the competition floor for coaches to stand, and we would appreciate if that video would be from that angle. It gives the best angle for the jury of appeal to make sure that the athlete it gets a fair shake when we're looking at those videos and determining the call. Also, the jury of appeal will use that video from the same angle and the perspective of the judges. So you need to be sure when you submit that it's not from the ends or it's not from an awkward angle that's hard to see. The members of the jury are not allowed to watch that video individually. They are not allowed to watch the video in slow motion, and they are not allowed to freeze frame that video. It must be watched in real time. Once they watch it the first time, the meet referee will poll the jury to make sure how they vote. If there is a conclusion, then they'll go with that. If there's not, then they are allowed to rewatch the video again in real time, and then a straw poll is taken until they come to a conclusion. Once they come to a conclusion, if the official video or the video that is submitted by the coach is inconclusive, if we are unable to see or determine based on the video, then what will happen is the original judge's decision will stand. We want to make sure that the judges, that everyone understands the judges have the best viewpoint of this, and we need to trust that they have made an appropriate call. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do, adding back, is the tiebreaker rules. Tiebreakers was taken away from finals several years ago, and the FIG has added them back, so we too are going to add them back to our scoring process. So starting this year, if there is a trampoline final, the gymnast with the higher sum of the E score will prevail. The gymnast with the higher sum of the HD score will prevail if there's still a tie after we go through the E-score. If there are still ties after we've gone through those two, then we won't break the tie. In tumbling, a little bit the same, but a little bit different. The gymnast with the higher sum of E-score of both passes in the final, since tumbling does 2 passes in the final. If there's still a tie, then what we'll do is we'll go with the E-score of the second pass in the final round. Then, of course, if there's still a tie, the tie won't be broken. In double mini, you'll notice this one looks very familiar to what you just saw. Since the double mini athletes do 2 passes as well, then we'll use the exact same process for their tiebreaker as well. So higher sum of the E-score of both passes. If there's still a tie, then the higher score of the the E-score of the second pass. If there's still ties, we'll not break the ties. In order to be sure that we make sure that the athletes have plenty of warm-up time and that the meet is able to run on time, what we have decided is that we're going to stick with what we've always had, which is flights should be no more than approximately 10 athletes. But what we want to ensure is that when a meet director or someone is scheduling those flights to begin with, that you should never, ever schedule more than 12 athletes per flight. We do understand that there are going to be times when you get to a meet that you may wind up with more than 12, but we want to make sure that you at least start out with just 12. Another thing that the program committee has voted on is to kind of tighten up our warm-up rules. I know that we've had a lot of problems over the last 3 years, people asking questions about why do elites get less warm-ups than a level 9 and 10 at nationals. And so we had a very lengthy discussion about what is needed and about what we need to do in order to make sure that all of our athletes are getting the appropriate warm-up. So what we're going to do, if there is a general training or a session warm-up offered at any time, and there is no comparable equipment in an adjacent facility like we had recently at US Gym Champs, then the following flight warm-ups will be provided. You notice that pretty much everything stays the same. For Gym Champs levels 9 and 10, or we'll get 2 touches for individual, 1 touch for synchro, 3 for tumbling, so that one's a little bit different, and 3 for double mini. That one is different as well. For the Youth Elite Junior Open and Senior, trampoline individual is 2 touch. Trampoline synchro is 2 touches because these competitors do 2 routines. And then tumbling, again, will get 3 touches. So that has changed for them. They will get 1 more touch now than they were accustomed to in the past, along with double mini as well, getting 1 additional touch. Now, if we don't provide a general training or a warm-up session at all, those warm-ups go back up to that maximum amount. So they'll get 3 touches on trampoline, and 1 touch for the synchro for 9 and 10, and 2 for youth, junior, open, and senior. And then the tumbling and double mini, both of those go back up to 4 touches to ensure that those athletes have plenty of opportunity to touch the equipment and do those warm-up routines to ensure their safety. And of course, the last one is if we have a general training or a session warm-up, and it's offered on comparable equipment in an adjacent facility. So this would be when our elite athletes warm up in the exhibit hall or the convention center, and then they move over into the arena. It will stay pretty much the same as well. Trampoline will continue to get 1 touch, synchro will get 1 touch, and then tumbling and double mini will both get 2 touches. At USA Gymnastics Championships, it is going to be required that a session warm-up is provided for all levels. Now, just to clarify, the types of different trainings or warm-ups, general training, we can provide that training at any point in time from the beginning of the competition process until the day of competition. So if we say, for example, we have those assigned trainings at Gym Champs or at Elite Challenge, that would be clarified as a general training. Now, session warm-up is going to be provided immediately prior to the session of competition. We have to provide a minimum of 50 minutes for that warm-up plus a minimum of 15-minute stretch time, and that stretch time cannot be included in that 50-minute warm-up time. Of course, a flight warm-up is going to be provided immediately prior to each flight. So once the athletes have been flighted in the back, they're marched out onto the field of play. That is when they will be allowed to get their flight warm-up. And then, of course, what we want to do is we want to put a parameter on how long those sessions can be now that we have removed the rule for our elites, especially, that say that they have to have a warm-up for every 4 to 5 flights. We have put a time limit on how long a session can be. Now, it may have several flights within that session, but a session cannot be more than 3 hours if we are doing a session warm-up. Of course, that doesn't include their 55-minute warm-up time and their 15-minute stretch. So it's 3 hours of actual competition. One of the things that we visited about at the program committee meeting and have had a call from the membership is to allow our JO male and female athletes to wear skin-tight leg coverings. So we have decided that in the current climate that we want to ensure that every athlete feels comfortable. And one of the things that we have done is we have added the ability for them to wear those skin-tight leg coverings. So they can be short, mid-thigh, mid-calf, or long. We used to have the rule where they could wear long leggings, but they had to be full length. So this gives them the opportunity to do the shorts or the mid-thigh or mid-calf. They can be worn underneath or on top of the leotard or the tank for the boys. They need to be in the same color as the leotard or a skin color. So when I say same color as the leotard, if the leotard was red and black, then the shorts would need to be either red or black. If the bottom of the leotard is black, it's not specific that the shorts have to be black in order to match that part of the leotard. The boys, if they are wanting to wear the compression shorts underneath their double mini shorts, or if they do trampoline and only wear shorts, they are allowed to do so as well. As judges, you will not take the deduction for the undergarment being visible because this will not be considered an undergarment. It is something that we are allowing the athletes to wear. Okay, so rule changes. Let's talk about what we're adding into our actual rules and how you'll judge. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is trampoline and horizontal displacement. First thing we have done is we have added horizontal displacement to the synchro score. We had several coaches who requested this last year, and we wanted to make sure that we were trying to follow along as closely as we can with our program and keeping it in line with the FIG and how they are scoring. So while we understand the scoring process is a little bit different because we do not offer the same number of judges, we want to try to keep the process as close to the same as we can. So what we have done is we have voted to add a horizontal displacement score to synchronized trampoline. So there will be one horizontal displacement judge placed on each trampoline. The score for those two judges is going to be averaged, and so that score will be added in. So now your HD score will be a total of 10 points. The execution score, once we drop the high and the low and get the two middle scores, that score will be averaged, and execution will be a maximum of 10 points. And then the synchro score, whether it's done by a synchro machine or by two synchro judges, will be worth 20 points. So if it's done with the machine, it will be doubled. If there are two synchro judges, then they will average that synchro score, and that synchro score will be doubled. And then, of course, we'll add the appropriate difficulty. The other thing about horizontal displacement is we want to be sure that horizontal displacement judges understand where they need to be. You need to place yourself on the floor next to the trampoline in which the gymnast is competing. You have the best vantage point there in order to see the lines and make sure that you are getting the appropriate deductions. I understand that up on the platform gives you a little bit better view on top, but it's very difficult to see those red lines, especially on the far trampoline when they come towards the judges' podium. So we want to make sure you have the best vantage point. The only thing is you need to make sure that you stay clear of the spotters so they are able to get to that athlete should they need to. The other thing that we've clarified in the rules is what happens if a horizontal displacement judge is not able to show their mark. We have a process in place for all judges should they not show their score, and we want to ensure that we have a process in place if a horizontal displacement judge misses their score. So the first thing that the chair of the panel is going to do is, of course, if there is video, they'll be able to review that video and come up with that HD score. They could, if they do not have that, offer the opportunity for the athlete to compete again. And if not, the chair would need to be able to replace that score. So if you are the chair of a trampoline panel, you need to, while you are watching the routine, counting the skills, one of the things that is going to be your responsibility is to also note as the routine is happening the HD deduction so that you would have that score should you need to. Okay, the other thing that you're going to notice is there was a bit of a clarification from the FIG this year about horizontal displacement. We, of course, whenever a new rule comes out, there's always a little tweaking when it comes to putting it in place the very first year, and that nothing is different about horizontal displacement. What was determined once they started working with the machine that measures horizontal displacement is that last year what we said was that if any part of the foot was outside the line, then the deduction would be applied. Once they started working with the machine, they realized that the rule stated that they measured on center of mass, and when your pinky toe is outside the line, your center of mass is not outside the line. So the way that the rules are going to read and to take place now, and the protocol that we will use is if the athlete is on the long side of the trampoline, the feet have to be clearly out. So you notice the picture there on the left where it says in, and out. Last year, the one in the middle would have been considered out, but it is not clearly out because part of the foot is on the line. So this year, it will be considered in. And of course, the last one there on that picture is out because the foot is completely out of the red line. The one to the right of the screen is on the short side of the trampoline. And again, the way that the new rule reads is that the foot must be clearly out of the line. 2/3 of the foot is how it says. What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to stress over the fact of was it 2/3, was it half? Just think of the word clearly out. So if you are the horizontal displacement judge, you are looking for the majority of that foot to be outside the red line in order to start taking that deduction for that space. Okay, our next slide for trampoline E-score. Sorry, we had a little bit of technical difficulty there. In elite competition, we started something new this year where we, when we're utilizing the judges, the way the process works is the judges are putting in their individual deductions into the computer. The computer takes those individual deductions, it finds the median, and then it uses that median deduction, multiplies it times 3 for the elite levels, and uses that deduction for each individual one. So you're not using a total score. If we are not able to utilize the new scoring system where it takes those individual deductions, then what we will do is if we have 3 judges and we're using the total score, those judges would have to be within 3/10 of a point of the median score. So if you have judges that are scoring 8.0, 8.3, 8.6, that would be an appropriate range. If you have 8.0, 8.3, 8.7, the chair of the panel would need to inform the judges that they need to evaluate the score, and that 8.7 would need to be pulled within range before the scores are flashed or entered into that scoring system. The other thing, I've kind of covered this a little bit in the previous slide, but just want to reiterate because the synchro scores are going to look vastly different from what they did before, so don't want to catch anybody off guard when they say the computer didn't calculate synchro right. A reminder that the E-score is now just 10 points instead of 20, and we are adding back an HD score. So the possibility that that score is very high is good. So it may bump that score up just a little bit. And then the synchro score, of course, is worth 20 points maximum. And then we will add the difficulty when that's appropriate, and then take any chair of the judges panel or any difficulty penalties. Those will come off of that total score. Okay, again, keeping in line with some of the new FIG requirements and making sure that our athletes are ready and capable of competing at an international event, we have some new level requirements for all of our elite levels. At the youth elite 11 and 12-year-old level, these requirements must be performed in their first routine, okay? So the first one is going to be an element that lands on the front or back of the body. In combination with that, they have to do an element, the first one is the front of the body. The second one is the back of the body, which has changed just a little bit from going in a combination. And then, of course, they have to do an element with 360 degrees of somersault rotation and 360 degrees of twist, so at least a full. For Youth Elite 13-14, this one is going to require an element landing on the front or back of the body. And then in combination with that, one that's from the front or back of the body. They also have to do a double front or a double back somersault with or without twist. And then one element with 540 degrees of twist and a minimum of 360 degrees of somersault rotation. So that would be a Rudy. A Rudy ball out would not be something that is acceptable at this level. For our junior elites, what they're going to need to do in their first voluntary routine, they're going to have one element to the front or back. Again, same as the 13-14s, one element from the front or back. Then they have to have a front or back somersault double with or without twist. And then again, you need to have that Rudy at the junior elite level as well. So all of our 15, 16-year-old athletes will have those requirements. And then for open, what you're going to notice is something that's new. They're going to have to mark two of their elements, and those two elements will count for difficulty in that first routine. So they'll mark them with an asterisk on the competition card. If they change what is on that competition card, whatever happens in that spot will be what gets the difficulty. Those two elements may not be repeated in the second routine, otherwise they don't get difficulty. So if you have an athlete that accidentally was supposed to do double pike and accidentally did double tuck in that marked spot on the first routine, then they would get difficulty for the double tuck in the first routine. Then if they did the double tuck again in the second routine, the difficulty value would not be added into their difficulty score because it would be considered a repeat. All right, let's move on to tumbling. Okay, then we'll start with our JO levels. We had some major problems last year with athletes who did not complete their routine. So let's say, for example, we have an 8-skill pass. They only did 7 elements. And those athletes who did an incomplete routine or their routine was interrupted wound up beating an athlete who had a completed routine. So there was a major outcry for us to look at those rules and see what we could do to ensure that that didn't happen again this year. So what was decided between the technical committee and the program committee is that we would now implement a chair of the judges panel deduction for an incomplete pass. Now, whether that pass is interrupted or whether the athlete just does not complete the pass, and it does not matter whether it is all 8 skills, whether it is 5 skills, or whether it is 3 skills, this particular deduction is going to apply. So there's going to be a 3.0 that's taken from the total score, and the chair of the judges panel will inform the scorekeeper about that. If an athlete does not perform the number of required skills for that level and for that particular pass. Now, this deduction is going to be in addition to any other chair of the judges panel deductions that would be applied to that routine as well. Okay, changes for the elite level. In tumbling, what we have done in order to encourage our athletes to pump up their difficulty just a little bit and start working towards a double, we have added a double somersault bonus. So for our competitors in Youth Elite Male, Youth Elite Female, Junior Elite Male, Junior Elite Female, Open Elite Male, Open Elite Female, and Senior Elite Female. So the only ones we're leaving out here are the Senior Elite Males. If they are to perform a second, third, fourth, ever how many they can fit in and how many they're able to safely do, double somersaults within a routine that have a difficulty value of 2.0 or greater, they are going to get a 3.0 bonus added to their difficulty score. So say, for example, we have an athlete that does 2 doubles. They're going to get their difficulty for the pass, and then they're going to get a 3.0 bonus for performing that second double. If they were to do 3 doubles within the pass, they would get a 6.0 bonus added to the difficulty score. So the bonus is applied to complete and incomplete passes. So if you do have an athlete that's trying to do 3 doubles within their pass, and they make it to the first two, but they are unable to complete the pass and do that eighth element that would have been a double, they are still going to get the 3.0 bonus for the second double somersault performed. Just to clarify now that we have added this rule that our senior men are the only ones that in the first pass, that the rules dictate that they have to do a double somersault as the last eighth element in order to avoid that pass requirement deduction. What we are trying to accomplish here is encouraging that double in the middle of the pass, and maybe there are athletes out there that are learning that transition in the middle of the pass, but they're just not quite strong enough to do a double at the end. So we are giving them the possibility of doing the double in the middle and not completing with a double. For the senior men, however, if they do not end that double somersault or that first pass in a double somersault, then we would take that 3.0 deduction from the total score for not meeting pass requirements. Okay, a couple of things have changed within the elite program this year, and one of those are mobility scores and the process. So just to clarify, we did have a few issues with mobility, when it happens, how long is it good for, when does it expire, when do we have to prove that we can compete at that level. So the elite committee, the program committee, has worked very hard to determine what actually defines the mobility season. So if you have an athlete who hits mobility score at any time from nationals until what we consider the end of the year, which would be July 31st, their mobility season is defined from August 1st to the following calendar year. So there's going to be some situations where you have an athlete that hits mobility in January. You do not have to move that athlete up immediately if you don't want to. You have until December the 31st of the following year. You may have an athlete that hits mobility at nationals. Their window is going to be a little bit shorter because it's a little bit later in the season, but you too have until December the 31st of the following calendar year. So during that elite mobility season, once you are ready for that athlete to move up, they must verify their participation at that new level within that length of time. If they do not compete and verify that new level, then that mobility score loses its value. Okay, so this is what trampoline mobility is going to look like for the elite athletes beginning October the 1st of this year. You'll notice that you've got, on routine 1, you've got a total E score. So they should score a 15-6 between the two E judges. And they have to hit a required difficulty depending on the level that they're at. And then they also have to do 20 skills. So now in order to mobilize into or through these levels, you notice that there are 3 requirements. There's going to be an E score, there's going to be a D score, and then there's going to be a number of completed elements that are required. Okay, same thing for tumbling mobility. We'll take a look at that as well. Okay, so just a little bit different. There's going to be an E score on the first routine. And notice a little hiccup there with the slide for the level 10s. That one is 25.2 as well. That just has a box that's empty there. Routine 2 also has to have 25.2. And then the difficulty between the two passes. So we'll take the difficulty from the first pass plus the difficulty of the second pass, and that's their required difficulty at that level. So now you're looking at a total score plus total number of skills. So they have to hit 2 completed routines, so a total of 16 skills total. Okay, double mini mobility for elite, same thing, begins October the 31st, and we'll take a look at those scores. Okay, again, we've got a couple of boxes there that are blank. All of these are listed in the rules and policies. So if you will double check all of these just to ensure you have the right information. Again, we've got routine 1 and routine 2, those E scores that are required. Again, we're going to take the difficulty from each of the passes and add it together, and that's how we come up with the total score that they're going to need. On Double Mini, they are required to have 4 completed skills in order to mobilize to the next level. Okay, just a few changes for the Elite National qualification. Trampoline qualifying scores for elites are now going to consist of a total score only. So if you notice, we have total scores here. So we're going to give the coaches and the athletes the ability to be a little bit creative about how you get to this point. You want to start with a lower DD and work on a higher execution score. That would be a possible way for you to take this path. The other possible way would be to have a higher difficulty, maybe not score quite as much on the execution part. None of these scores include time of flight. It is exclusive. So again, the 20 skills. Okay, have another little hiccup with our PowerPoint here. Our apologies for that. We can go to the next slide for tumbling qualification scores. I'm missing a couple of numbers again. Refer to the rules and policies. Again, the total score and what needs to be completed here are the 16 skills. And then, of course, last but not least, our Double Mini qualification score process. We're going to have the total score from Routine 1 and Routine 2, so those two are added together. The only other requirement is that they do have to complete both routines, so a total of 4. One of the things that the program committee and the staff in the national office is committed to the TNT community is that you have a voice. And what we are providing, giving opportunity, is for coaches and judges to have a voice and to ensure that our membership is heard. We want you to know how incredibly important you are to our program. And that we value your opinions and your suggestions. So we're going to start providing some opportunities for you to do so. If you'll watch our TNT page on the website, you're going to see opportunities for you to access a Google Doc that is going to give you opportunity to list suggestions, offer feedback. If you feel like that there are problems with either rules or anything, we will check that Google Doc often, and those suggestions or problems will be sent to the appropriate committee, and someone on that committee will get back to you, and they'll also take your concerns or suggestions forward to the appropriate committee, whether it be the JO committee, the technical committee, the elite committee, and then of course that appropriate member will bring it on to the program committee. The other things that we are going to do is we're going to do a couple of the sessions at National Congress where we're going to have a roundtable discussion. We'd love to do this at Nationals, but it has just gotten to the point where our national championship is cram-packed from the time the sun comes up until it goes down every day, and there's just not a time. And we want there to be time for you to sit down with those that are on committees and with staff and give feedback as well. We are also going to participate in a couple of regional congresses this year, so we encourage you to help get the word out to the TNT community that there will be tracks, trampoline and tumbling learning tracks at a couple of those congresses, and to be sure and come. And we will also offer opportunity at those regional congresses to give feedback and suggestions as well. Okay, this last little bit, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of clarification, some things that maybe went on this year that maybe didn't make a whole lot of sense or that we didn't have a rule for. Again, the JO mobility is going to be the same as the elite. Once an athlete within the JO program hits a mobility score at a sanctioned competition, they have until December the 31st of the following year to verify that or compete at the new level. So if you're a mobility chair or state chair, or you are the person that helps in your state or region take care of those, it's important now that the date that that athlete hit the mobility score is noted so that you'll know when that score actually expires. Okay, first little clarification. These are things that came up this year that kind of made us all sit back and go, because there might have been a difference of opinion of how we handle it. So we had a level 7 double mini athlete that landed in front of zone A, took some steps, and when she did, her toe went outside the landing area. So if you were the chair of the panel, what would your call be? Well, here's a picture of the actual incident as it happened. You notice that her right foot overhangs the edge of the floor. So the chair of the judges panel would make the following call. You're not going to take the deduction for landing in zone B because that athlete is level 7 and that is allowed at that level. And you are going to advise your execution judges to take the appropriate instability, whether it was 1 to 3/10. But there is no deduction for being outside that landing area because this athlete actually didn't touch anything. She did break the plane, and we've used that phrase several times when determining whether or not an athlete gets a deduction or not. But this would be very similar to if an athlete landed in zone A, landed right smack dab in the middle, had their arms out to the side. The arms broke the plane of zone A, but they haven't actually touched anything. Because they've not touched anything, and because this particular athlete did not touch the floor, then all we're going to look at is the instability of that athlete. We're not going to deem that they were outside the zone. The other thing that we felt needed to be clarified, because there were some disconnects and some confusion on this, is that the deduction for an incomplete competition card or a missing competition card is taken from the total score of the first completed routine on all disciplines. So if you turn a card in, the way that we would determine whether or not it was complete or incomplete was, did it have the FIG difficulty shorthand? And was it completed with the values? We are not going to take a deduction for misaddition, but it would be a deduction if it's not completely filled out. So it needs to have the athlete's name, age, level. It has to have the FIG shorthand for the skills, their value, and then it needs to be totaled. Now, each athlete is allowed to change what they do on their competition card with no deduction, and that pertains to all disciplines. Next one is double mini. A little bit of confusion this year because we did tighten this a little bit now that level 4 is a somersaulting level. We have tweaked this just a little bit, that the mounting aid that can be used can only now be used in levels 1 through 3 because that is the only levels that do not flip. A mounting aid might be a panel mat. It might be an incline or a springboard, anything that you use in order for your smaller athletes to aid in getting onto the double mini with 2 feet. Okay, another call on double mini. You have an athlete that lands in front of zone A, or in zone A in front of B, takes 5 steps, ran straight through zone A and travels back into zone B. So the question here was, they landed in zone A, or B, sorry, went through A, went back to B. And so the judge wanted to know, do they take the deduction for traveling to a greater zone? What do you think the call would be? Well, the chair of the panel needs to inform the execution judges to take instability, of course, 3/10 of a point, the max, because they took 5 steps. They are also going to apply the deduction for 9/10 of a point to the total for the initial landing in zone B. But we're not going to take a deduction for changing zones because that athlete didn't change zones. While they went from B to A to B, they started in B. So we're not going to take a deduction for them going back to B because they have already been there. So they actually did not change zones. All right, one other clarification on double mini. A little bit of a problem in the difference between brushing the pad, touching the pad, landing on the pad. So the first one we're going to look at here is touching the pad. If an athlete brushes the pad on the way up or on the way down, the chair of the judges panel will apply a 3/10 of a point penalty to the total score. The way this works is if the athlete is able to complete the element and the majority of their feet were on the double mini bed, not on the double mini mat that covers the springs, that's going to be considered a completed routine, and we're going to score it out of 10 with that 3/10 from the total. If they're unable to complete the dismount skill, then the routine is interrupted and we're going to take it out of 0. Next scenario is going to be landing on the pad. So pretty much the way that you're going to determine whether or not they get credit or they don't get credit, just think of the term all or nothing. So if all of their feet are on the pad. You notice this athlete has a little bit, but all means both feet are on the pad. Then we're going to interrupt the routine because they're in a very unsafe place. If part of their feet are in the bed and part of their feet are on the pad, then they would get credit like that previous slide. Okay, another clarification. We had some difference of opinion of where and when a straddle counts, how much angle does there have to be, when would it receive credit for that, maybe in a compulsory routine. So what we're looking at, several years ago, we took away the requirement of the hip angle in the straddle and just said if the feet are a certain degrees apart, it's considered a straddle, and then you take the appropriate deductions. So what we're going to look at today and what we're going to talk about is when it gets credit is the angle that is between the feet and the legs. So the athlete has to have 45 degrees between the feet and the legs to get credit as a straddle jump. If it's less than 45, then it's going to be deemed a pike jump. Okay, so this slide is going to show you kind of what the deduction would be for the leg angle. Of course, you notice the one on the left, the angle is very good. So there's not going to be a deduction for the leg angle. There's going to be a slight deduction for the 90 degrees. And then, of course, if the athletes hit 45 degrees, which would be the minimum angle, we're going to call it a straddle jump, but there's going to be a substantial deduction for position. If the athlete is performing a compulsory routine and they hit less than 45, so 40 degrees or less, then we're going to consider that a pike jump, and it would interrupt the routine because it is a compulsory routine and they did not perform the skill as prescribed. So some of the deductions that we need to think about for straddle jumps with an angle of 45 degrees greater than 45 between the feet and legs would be, did the hands touch the tops of the feet? If not, then there's going to be a deduction. If the legs are bent, the feet and toes are not pointed, did they show proper takeoff position, which includes hip and leg angle? And did they show an extension within the top part of the skill? And then, of course, the angle of the legs in respect to the trampoline or to the double mini bed. So this graphic shows you what your deduction would be for the leg angle only, which, if you look at it, incorporates the hip angle as well. So if the legs are total 90 degrees between the bed and the legs, you're not going to take a deduction. Now remember, this deduction is one deduction within your 5/10 of a point. So you're also looking at hand placement, where their legs, how far their legs are apart, where their feet and toes pointed, where their legs bent. If the legs drop between 90 and 65 degrees, the chest will drop forward. So that's going to be a 1/10 of a point within your 5/10 of a point. And then, of course, if the athlete just barely gets their feet out of the bed, 65 to 45 degrees, then that deduction for just the leg angle is going to be 2/10 of a point. So you notice in these photos, what we've showed you is several scenarios and what you would take just for position and the leg angle. So again, within your 5/10 of a point, the first one has very good position, so you're not going to take a deduction for that. And then 1/10 of a point because the legs are a little bit low. The second pike jump, the position is a little bit more open, so we're going to take a 1/10 of a point. The legs are a little bit lower, so this particular skill just for position and legs would have 2/10 of a point deduction. And then, of course, the one on the far right, the position is very open and the legs are very low. So we would take 2/10 of a point, which is the maximum that we can take for position, and then 2/10 of a point for the leg position. The other skill that has given us a little bit of problem this year is the difference between a Jonah and a Branny. When you hear or see the words in a compulsory routine, Branny, it is specific that the athlete must show 45 degrees of forward somersaulting rotation before they twist. So it's going to be very obvious that the athlete initiates the somersault before the twist. The skill that twists immediately out of the trampoline or the double mini bed, so they're going to drop their shoulder very quickly once their feet leave the bed, is going to be considered a Jonah, which is not what the compulsory prescribes. So you would interrupt that routine for an incorrect skill. Another clarification, this one on tumbling. You have an athlete that is required to land in the landing area, and they land in the landing zone or landing area, and they step back to the track. this is what is called changing zones. So this athlete gets a deduction for leaving the landing area. Now, this one is a chair of the judges panel deduction, so it comes off the total score. If the athlete was to step to the side and step to the floor, then the judges are going to take a 1.0 off for stepping to the floor, and the chair of the judges panel is going to take a 0.3 of a point for changing zones. Okay, another thing in tumbling, when an athlete lands on the track and steps back to the track, the execution judges are going to take instability. So the chair has taken the deduction for changing zones, and those E judges are going to take the appropriate amount, 1 to 0.3 of a point, for the instability that happened with these steps. Another thing that we want you to really be conscientious about is that hop or step prior to a power hurdle. In the tumbling code of points, when it says power hurdle round off, that is considered one skill. If it says power hurdle round off rebound, then all of that is one line. Then those 3 parts of that element can only take up to a 0.5 of a deduction. What is important when you are watching that round off is that you watch for the appropriate presentation of a power hurdle, which means they take off solidly from 2 feet and they push out of the floor, and they're going to go right into that lunge position prior to the round off. So if that athlete takes any hops or steps prior to that, that is part of your 0.5 of a point in deductions. The hops and the steps are not changing that into a different skill, but it may be giving them a little bit of an advantage because they have more power. So that is up to you as an E judge to take that appropriate deduction for that particular flaw. All right, other thing in tumbling, the last skill must be at or above shoulder height. If the chair of the judges panel ever turns around and say, judges, we're going to say that that last skill was not above shoulder height, you should have a major deduction because that skill was not done correctly. There was not a correct block to make that skill go up instead of backwards. What we're looking for is a somersault at the end of a tumbling pass that looks a little bit like an exclamation point at the end of a sentence. You want it to make a statement. If it's long, flat, and fast, it was not done correctly. It's not above shoulder height, so you should have a major deduction, which is 0.5 of a point. Okay, just a reminder about your judging category and what you do now. You have a couple of different options that you can take if you are a currently certified judge, and we just want to be sure that you are sure that you have done everything you need to do to keep that certification current. Of course, if you're taking the annual T210 right now, then you will stay current in years 2 through 4 of the quad because our requirements are not a retest every year, however, just an update. At the beginning of a new quad, it is required for every judge to retest because that is when we have a major rule overhaul and all of the routines are different. So we want to be sure everyone is as up to date as possible. Of course, once you take these courses, you are required to judge a required number of competitions and also do a required hours in the gym of observation. All of those things are listed in the rules and policies in the judges section. Okay, the other path is if you want to upgrade your category. So a judge is required to judge specific numbers of competitions before they upgrade. All of those are listed in the rules and policies as well. Once you take that next category exam, you're required to score an 80% or above, and you'll earn the tested category. If you score 79 or below, you don't lose your rating, but you retain that previous category. So that gives you the opportunity to do that. We do encourage you to use the tools that the TNT Technical Committee has put together to help you learn, because that step from category 3 to category 2, that's kind of a big step because you have to learn difficulty. We understand that there are a lot of clubs, states, regions out there that don't see a lot of those higher level passes on a very frequent basis, and so it's difficult for some to learn that. We do have some tools that you can use to help you learn to do that. So if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to the technical committee. Another clarification, in the past what we have allowed is for coaches and athletes to test multiple categories in the same series of courses. So say, for example, you went to a clinic, they offered category 3 on Friday or Saturday. You would take and test those. As long as you passed, you were allowed to take the category 2. What we were finding out is that that was maybe not the best path and didn't provide the best quality information and opportunity and experience for those people. So what is going to be the process moving forward is they have to test and pass their first category and fulfill the requirements. So that's going to be the number of judged competitions before they upgrade and test at that next category. We understand that might be a little bit difficult for coaches to do, but do know that you have the opportunity to judge at any type of the sanctioned competition and get those requirements in. So if you had an in-house meet, an in-house eligibility meet, that would qualify as a sanctioned competition. One of the things that we are very excited about is last year we had a HUGS pilot program, and HUGS is a program for special needs athletes. We had a small group of people who got together, put some rules together, had small programs and incorporated it into some of our sanctioned competitions. And it looks like this program is going to grow. So we are very excited about the opportunity for including HUGS in our program. Judges, it is important that you get the information that you will need because the HUGS program is judged just a little bit differently. Again, if you will watch the TNT program page, there's going to be information on that page and a link provided for you to access a PowerPoint that's going to give you the specifics on how each level is judged and what the routines would be. The routines will be listed under the HUGS program. That page is already on our website and will be updated to include a level 3 this year. But if you are interested in learning more about judging in this program, please take the opportunity to go and access this PowerPoint. If you have trouble with that, again, you can reach out to the technical committee and they will be more than happy to send you this PowerPoint with that information. Again, communication is key. We can't know what we need to do and the changes that we need to make, the conversations that we need to have, unless we know what your questions are and unless we have your feedback. So the technical committee has created a couple of things to help you get in contact with them easily. Of course, they are always at your service should you have questions. They have a specific email now that's there on the screen. You're free to use that and reach out to them. And then they're also going to have a general judge's website where you can go and see all of the information. If you have to ask questions, there is also a web address down there at the bottom that you're able to use. That'll take you to a website where you are able to ask questions and they'll get back to you just as quickly as they can. If you need information on the fly, I encourage you to get their contact information because we know sometimes you're on the field of play when you have that question and you need that question answered as quickly as possible. So get that contact information and feel free to reach out at any time. Of course, we want to wish all of you the best of luck in the upcoming season. We appreciate each and every one of you so much. We could never do what we do without the judges and the coaches who are on the field of play who are helping athletes achieve their dreams on a daily basis. So best of luck in the upcoming season, and we look forward to seeing you all at the competition.